Okay, everybody, I'm going to start this thing. This is how to make a simple ebook. This is a how-to. I'm going to put a timestamp in the chat here, and this is a rehearsal. I'm going to do a presentation in a few days, and I want to go through the slides and go through the little demo. And I think I know the steps, and it'll be just good to go through it again. I first have to find the PowerPoint. Pardon me. There we go. How to make a simple ebook. And this thing is let me first crank this all the way down, all these other pieces here. This is what we're going to talk about today. Primarily going to be a how-to show, mostly a show and tell. So you see some of the procedures and some of the key things you need to know to make your own ebook. But I'd be remiss if I didn't spend just a moment to mention that I wrote an ebook and I produced an ebook way back in 2017. This was a book that was just to exercise the ebook publishing process. It was a exercise for me to learn how to publish a book on Amazon, how to self-publish a book on Amazon and other platforms. I produced a generic ePub and also published it to the Apple bookstore, as well as I think I even went to Barnes and Noble, their little ebook marketplace. But it was again an exercise just to learn what the procedures were. If you're interested to check out the book, there's a QR code here. And it was largely this experience that made me think, oh, I should do a talk on an ebook. I spent the last month, though, reading about the history of the ePub and ebook formats. I found this really nice YouTube by Michael Sowers from 2011, where he talks about all the different ebook devices from the early days leading up to 2007, when Amazon produced the Amazon Kindle. I was amazed that it was that far back, but I do have pictures of my first experiences with the e-ink version of the Kindle. And I think in my own reading, I'm probably reading 30, maybe even 40% of my books are digital. It's just a super convenient way to obtain books and get them immediately, especially now that the library has a pretty good mechanism for lending out books digitally. And I also like these slides because Michael Sowers talks about the major ebook formats. In fact, there's really two. There's the ePub format, which is the most common standard, as you see here. It's undergoing a standards process with the W3C. And there are links in these slides once I make them available, so you can see the different links that I reference while putting together this presentation. But ePub is an open standard, and Amazon, when they produced their first Kindle in 2007, they went with a different standard, the Mobi Pocket standard, which was produced by, I believe, the Palm Pilot. It's a database format from the little bits that I read about it, but we don't have to worry too much about it, even though Amazon has arguably the larger marketplace for books, because The Kindle direct publishing has ways, and there are tools that let you convert from your ePub to the Amazon format. This is what's inside an ebook. Uh, the way to think of it is it's a container, a gigantic zip file, which is what it is. It's a container full of HTML files. We're going to take a look at that right now. But what I like about this container of XML files is it evokes the original goal of the ebook. When it first came out, the internet was, or the World Wide Web was pretty much getting more solid. And when they realized where the user is in some control of the layout, they looked to web pages as a way to do all of this stuff. So let me go take a look at a ebook. Um, I have an ebook here called Immediately Effective Instruction. When I double click it, it opens up in my ebook reader, which is called Akil Reader. I just found something on Windows 10. There are other ebook readers out there for digital reading, not just a Kindle app, but open ones that you can download and open up arbitrary ePubs. And the author of this book is Don Jones, and he and I were involved in a publishing project. I liked what he had to say about effective instruction, immediately effective instruction, and you could see he trademarked it. Don produced this ePub to lay down his thoughts on how to be an effective instructor. But I like the idea that what a great way. It's like a brochure, a website, but here it's actually his ideas that we can all take in detail. So this is an ePub, as you can see inside of a book. There's a table of contents, etc., etc. But when we take a look inside this, we can also, because it's a container, we can also access the contents of this ePub using a zip tool, in which case I have here a tool called 7-Zip, and if I open this, you can see it's a zip file, and it's got a couple of directories, one of which contains a bunch of XHTML files, as well as a few other files, which, if you dig a little further, these are all files that are defined by the ePub spec. So this is the end result of an ePub process, the ePub production process, which I will now demonstrate in more detail. So, because what we're going to do today is we're going to learn how to make our own. But what I want to do now is open this up using the tool that we're going to use, which is called Sigil. Now I'm going to skip past this prompt here. When I open this up in Sigil, what we see is the same directory full of XHTML files, and we see there's a little style sheet here. This tool allows us to edit an entire ePub, and this is the tool that we're going to use, that I recommend people using when you want to produce your own ePub. It's a full-fledged ePub editor, so there's a lot of different functionality in the tool itself. You can manipulate the metadata, edit these files directly if you wanted to, and when you do, you see the changes immediately in the preview window here, as well as you can navigate through the content by the table of contents, search, replace, etc. This tool does all of this in the context of an ePub, so you don't have to go and zip up these files yourself and make the correct directories. It's a very powerful tool, and it is a tool that I recommend people at least become familiar with as you consider producing your own ePub. That's the inside of an ePub. It's a container and it's full of HTML files. In my rehearsal, I'm going to have this as a page, but if I use the PowerPoint, this page will not be displayed, but it is here as a reference in case people are curious what's available, what can be put into this container. When we're making an ePub, we need to understand HTML. That's all. We just need to understand the basics of HTML, a little bit of CSS, and I'm going to give you the briefest introduction to those subjects in a moment. Of course, we need to write and obtain our own obtain our own content. We're not going to be, this is not a writing class. What we will do is instead find some content on the internet from which we will produce an ebook. And since the subject of this, or since the theme of this hackathon is cooking, we'll make a cookbook together. Once you have your content, we need to format or convert that content into the ePub. There's a terrific tool that I learned these last 2 weeks called WordToEPUB, which allows you to convert your Sigil. I am not on a Mac, but when I looked at Apple Pages, the tool Apple Pages allows you to say regarding converting content should apply very easily on the Mac. But we are using a Windows-based system today. Finally, in this talk, I'll briefly go over book covers. There's a lot going on with book covers thanks to AI art. We could talk on and on about that after this presentation. I'll show you how I produced the book cover for my book and the steps that in general you should be following to produce a book cover. I'm not a web designer or a book designer or even artistically inclined, although I do believe if you work at it, anybody can make your own art. However, the procedures I'll show you today are things that I think you'll be able to find and put to use pretty quickly. So let's go and make our own ebook. Let's go and do this already. HTML. The briefest introduction to HTML is that it takes text that you have here, and again, in the rehearsal, I'm anticipating that there'll be a few people watching this talk, and I'm anticipating that people will hopefully ask some questions or propose that they understand and know HTML already. So I can make this part quite quick. I can go through this quite quickly. The introduction to HTML is that it takes text, which is here, for example. These elements have specific names, and they're very short names, full paragraph, and header 1, header 2. The elements, the names of these elements are enclosed inside of brackets, and these brackets appear at the front of the text and at the end of the text. That's an important piece with ePubs, as they have to be that's an important piece for ePubs, as they have to be, I'm going to call it, they have to be properly formed as an XML file. Now, in the rehearsal, I'm not going to get too deep into it. I'll just mention that they have to be at the beginning and the end. And you can see here I'm being a little distracted by these put you in timeout. I'm going to say hide, etc., etc. Um, one of the things that you learn about HTML is that there's a lot of different elements. So you can have elements that denote the tagging, and some of these can be H2 all the way down to I believe H5. See if that. Let me see if this works. Yeah, and you can see it becomes very small. There's also list tags for both ordered and unordered. And I said you didn't really need to know CSS, but very briefly, CSS allows you to take this markup, which really controls the structure of your document. CSS allows you to take those elements and put a little bit of style on them. Here I've taken the H2 and I've made it center. If I wanted to do the same for the H5, I'll highlight this whole thing and I'll put this as H5. This will center the tag here for, this will center the H5 tag because I've instructed it. There's also a lot of other things like margin, border, background color, on and on. And when you do work on your publishing project, you'll find yourself using HTML and manipulating its style using CSS to make your book look as well as you could make it look. I'm gonna go get rid of this, and I'm gonna make this be the H5 again, H2. Now I'll save this also. Now that we have the HTML figured out, let's go and get ourselves some content. When I was thinking about making an ebook, I thought, oh, it would be great. We could shoot some recipes to each other doing this talk. We're not going to do that. I found a cookbook here called the Italian Cookbook. This is from the website Project Gutenberg. Project Gutenberg is a place where you can find free ebooks, because these ebooks on their website, their copyright has all expired, and there's a whole mess of people that digitize these books and make ePubs out of them and make well-formatted HTML out of them, etc., etc. So I found this cookbook here. If I click on this to take a look, it's a little cookbook with some interesting ways to describe a recipe. My wife does indexing for a cookbook website, a cookbook indexing website called Eat Your Section. You do see ingredients here, so you do see, it is kind of a, I suppose, the early form of a cookbook. There's also no illustrations, but this was a cookbook from 1919. But what we're going to use this book for is to produce our own ebook. So this is our content. And I think if you're out there thinking, oh boy, I can't wait to put my book into an ePub, chances are your book is already in a word processor of some kind. It's in a file of some sort. And I'm going to guess 80% of the time it's going to be in a word processor. So we'll do the same thing. We'll open up Microsoft Word. We're going to take a blank document, and we're going to just take all of this text and just pop it into here. And you can see from the cookbook, you can see from Microsoft Word, this is actually about 100 pages of book. And inside of Microsoft Word, we can directly convert this file into an ePub using this tool called WordToEPUB. WordToEPUB. This is a Windows-based tool, as I said, but you can also take any document that you output that is a Word document, including documents created from Apple Pages, and convert it using this tool. This assumes you have a Mac and a Windows machine, but when you're on a Mac, there are plenty of tools, and more importantly, Sigil is available on the Mac as well. I'm going to save this as a file, put this in my downloads directory where I have all my other stuff, and I'm going to save this as a PDF, the Italian Cookbook version 5. And now that it's in a Word document, if you notice, by installing WordToEPUB, I have a button here to do the conversion directly in Microsoft Word. So I can just press this button. There's also a, an actual program in which I select the file and then it'll do the conversion. But here, if I do OK, it will transform this Word document into an ePub. It won't take very long. What I'll do once it's opened is once it's saved is, here they mention something interesting about the heading. I'll get into the heading in a moment when we construct this book using Sigil. But now that we have this, I can then take this book and again double click on it using my Aquil reader, and I can see that it is the Italian Cookbook version 5, and it has a table of contents that's kind of like machine generated table of contents. And if I navigate through the book, you can see that it's an ebook. And let me go here. That's it. That's all that you need to do to make an ebook. I am going to continue though and show you how to do this using Sigil, because one of the things that is great about doing your own ebook is that you have full control over how the book should look. Once you learn HTML, it's very easy to make the book look how you want it to look. So even though we have the book in an ePub already, and it's probably good enough, if you were to think about, oh, I want to maybe put this on Amazon, which you shouldn't because it's had a copyright. I don't know what the market is for Italian cookbooks from the 1900s, early 1900s, but if you did want to put it on Amazon, you probably want to refine the This is the ePub inside of our reader tool. I'm going to X out of this, and I'm now going to open this inside of Sigil. What you see is that this consists of 4 XHTML files. And this part here is what looks like this is the table of contents. It's an ePub 3 document. If I go to this one, 03, you can see it just has this one file, this one snippet of text. If I go to chapter 4, this contains the entire rest of the book. And again, this is fine for your initial use, for your own reading, your own personal use. You can navigate around it, but if you look at the table of contents, you can see that it's a little bit haphazard with these numbers. It again does it using the header element. So if we click on 5 here, there's a header element here, 3, and that becomes part of the table of contents. If I go back to here, 5, and you can see that it's, in many respects, it because the tool made its best guess as to where the chapter heading should be, we get this what looks like a little bit messy. So let's go back and take this same content and do the exact same formatting using Sigil. I'm going to go and make a new book, an ePub 3 book, and this time I'm going to recognize the fact that this thing here is itself a HTML document. We can inspect this, but maybe the best way is to view the page source. You can see it's got some HTML tags in there. So we can save this content as a HTML file. I'm going to save this, make this version 5. And when I open this inside of Sigil, or rather, when I take that HTML that I saved and put it into Sigil, we can manipulate it even more. Now, we can already manipulate the book that WordToEPUB generated, but this is another approach to doing it. Let me go first bring in this file. I'm going to add an existing file. Downloads. I bring in this HTML file, and here's that same cookbook again. This time it's all inside of one big file, which is fine. There's also no table of contents, so we're going to have to go and add those things. This page is a blank page, so the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of this. And one of the things that you find yourself doing, at least I found myself doing when I was doing the preparation for this, is that you find yourself doing what is called a cleanup exercise. You're cleaning out a lot of the stuff that you don't want from a conversion process or from a pure import of raw HTML. And in this case, Project Gutenberg has this boilerplate here at the top. And this boilerplate is one that you don't need this. I'm going to, in fact, I'm going to go scroll from here all the way to the beginning of that section, start of the ePub, and I'm going to just delete all this. And now the book starts, so you have to be careful of the tags here. Tag mismatch. I'm going to go and reinsert all that and do it this way. Yes, is it this section? I'll go all the way to this section here, boilerplate. There's also some boilerplate at the very bottom of this HTML. Even though Project Gutenberg is entirely free, it apparently has some legalese here, which we don't have to use. I'm going to go to the very end of this zucchini. That's maybe not the best way to do it. Go back all the way to the bottom and just click. Well, again, you see a little bit of the work that's involved. Here's a translator's note. One of the things that you notice with Sigil is when you highlight a HTML element, it will attempt to highlight its end element here. Elements have to be paired together. So here it makes it easy for me to just take this and just delete that part. And then this whole section here, starting even with this pre, I can just get rid of it. The body, but just this section. So that's a little bit part of the cleanup, and it'll make your document, you won't have the Gutenberg boilerplate in there. Well, one of the conventions of a ePub is that the book is usually broken up into individual XHTML files by chapter. So it's hard to maybe figure out where the chapters are in here, but what I did looking at this book for the last 2 weeks is I found that everywhere there is an H2 element, and I'm going to just search for it here like this, I find that it ends up being what looks like a logical chapter headings. H2, first of all, there's no H1 elements when I did that search for H1. Click here to get the count, and there are no matches. But if I do a search for H2, there's 8 matches here. So what I can do is everywhere there's an H2, I can split up the file. And Sigil has a great mechanism for doing this. If I find the first one and go to the second, which is this preface, I can in fact just come here and press enter, and then there's a button here called split at cursor. And when I do that, it introduces another page here, section 01, which contains the preface. And this page here is now a very small file, which is just the actual start of the book. Now it's not there anymore. So what we'll do is we'll go back to this file and just locate all the H2 elements and split it. Now we can do that one at a time, but Sigil lets you locate and mark each of the locations where you want to do a split by doing an insert split marker, which has this convenient shortcut, Control-Shift-Enter. If I press that, it places a marker class right here. So I'm going to search for the next H2, put a marker here, Control-Shift-2, same thing with the next one. Now this one has 2 H2s next to each other, so I'm just going to leave that alone. That's some bad rendering. Control-Shift-Insert, Control-Shift-Insert. And what we're doing is in the spirit of following the ebook convention of splitting up your work into multiple chapters. An ePub is of course read on a device that you might think of as a glorified browser. And a browser that has to load a gigantic big file will behave a little more slowly. And instead, an ebook that is split across several smaller files will load much faster. And that's the goal of doing that's the reason behind the convention and why there is a facility to split these big documents across markers so that you can have multiple files. I placed my markers in all the 5 or 6 locations, so now I can click on edit and say split at markers, and when I do, I've introduced what looks like 6 new files, and each of these is, I'll close the other tabs here, each of these represents a section of the book. What we want to try next is, hey, let's go and make a new table of contents. To do that, Sigil examines all of the H2, all of the header elements for its for its table of content information. In Microsoft Word, the H1, H2 is actually manipulated using these heading styles. And you can make any part of your book have different headings, and WordToEPUB will correctly detect that heading and make an appropriate table of content for it. But since we're inside of Sigil, we have that control. So we're going to click on this tool here, Generate Table of Contents. And when I click on it, you can see it not only captures all the H2s, there's no H1s here, but it also captures the H3s and the H4s. So we'll have to go through this whole list, but I found that you can also just select up to a certain level. So if I do select up to level H1, well then H2, then it'll only pick the 8 or so in there. We know that part 2 is not included or isn't interesting, so I can just not include it. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is that if I just pick on H3, there's nothing, but if I pick H4, we get the rest of it. That's all included now, but I'm going to click on up to level 2 and part 1, and I'm going to click on this toggle, and you can see that the ones that are included have a check mark, and I can then pick and choose a couple of the H4 elements, just so you can see the table of contents that it will generate. I'm going to pick rice cakes. I go further down, fried mushrooms, stewed eggplants. Sounds delicious. Asparagus, my favorite. And I know there's some desserts at the bottom, lemon pudding. And now that these are included, if I press OK, Sigil will generate a table of contents with the appropriate nesting, because H3 is inside of H2, which is inside of H1. Now our ebook is shaping up. I think what I'll do is present the information on how to make a cover. We've spent a short amount of time in Sigil. I hope you see what its capabilities are. You can take a tool and convert your book into an ePub, but chances are you're going to want to manipulate your ePub so that it looks the way that you want it to look. The last expression of how you want it to look is the cover. I have a resource here called Do-It-Yourself Covers um, by this longtime blogger, author, Derek Murphy. He produces and writes his own books. He's a graphic artist, a PhD in literature, etc., etc. He's got the credentials. He spent a lot of time process for generating book covers, and he has this terrific YouTube which I watched on how to make an ebook cover using Microsoft Word. And we're not going to watch this video together. I think it's for the rehearsal. I'm going to know the exact number of minutes. I think it's about 20 minutes. What I will do is instead show you what the procedure is to make a cover following his process. One of the things that he talks about is getting a good image. So from a website called Flickr, I found an image that I thought would be pretty good for the inside of I thought would be pretty good for a book cover. One brief word about images is you do want to be sensitive to any photographer's work. Take a look at the rights. If any rights are reserved, you want to be sure that you can adhere to those to those rights. Here, some rights are reserved, but I search specifically for images that have a Creative Commons license, so I can use and adapt this provided I do an attribution, and I can do that attribution in the ePub. But here's a picture of some tomatoes that I like. What Derek Murphy's process involves is, and what I liked about it is that you didn't need Photoshop. I'm, again, not a web designer. I know everybody knows about Photoshop. It's procedure, use Microsoft Word. And what you do in Microsoft Word is you take your layout, you zap out the margins, and then you just insert your picture. I have the picture already in a folder. And now that it's in here, I want to set its layout option such that the text wrapping is behind it is behind the text. Now, what that means is that when I insert some text using a text box, I can say in Italian Cookbook version 5, I the font, which I know we'll need to do. We'll make this 48. I think in the book I noticed that it's two words in the book. I know a cookbook is one word, but so this is the essence of a book cover. Now, the picture, of course, needs to be manipulated. So you just grab these handles here and just crank it up so that you can make it appear a little nicer. And I used it's cool. I used this text box, which you can control its appearance by formatting it. Here I'm going to disable the fill, for example, and I'm going to make the style of it, oops, nope. I'm going to make the color of the characters be, yeah, that, for example. And that's, you know what, that right there is quote good enough for now. And the procedure is you will take this, you will, there's actually a lot more to the procedure. There's details such as the correct ratio, which is I think 6:9 for a book in the U.S. Different publishers have different specifications for their pictures, and Derek talks about that in his YouTube. But for purposes of constructing your own cover, that is what I did, and it still you can come up with a good do-it-yourself cover. You would then take this cover and view it in full screen, crank it up, and then take a screenshot with the correct resolution, and you would bring it in to your Sigil document. How do we do that? We will again add a file, an existing file, and I already have this. This is one I made from before. It puts it in the correct folder already, and it's interesting because the notion of an ePub is that it's a website in a box. So everything for the book is inside of the zip file. So you first need to put your assets inside of the ePub, and then once you have it, you can then click on Add Cover and reference it from the cover page. Now that we have a cover, The only thing left to do is to add some metadata. That's how we're going to know what we're doing, what the book this is. I'm going to say the Italian Cookbook version 5. Yeah, and I'm going to say metadata author, and I'm going to say Maria Gentle, and I'd like to add one called contributor, maybe date created. You see what we have to do. Oh, date modified. Okay, then add modified. I add metadata. I'm going to put language English. For example, you don't need. I don't think you need all of these metadata. Sigil documentation gives guidance on what metadata you need, as well as the different publishers. You say okay. Now you can save this thing as your own ebook. I'm going to say the Italian Cookbook version 5A. It doesn't matter. And to avoid confusion, because I had this before, for us to look at this, I'm going to use a different ebook. Actually, let me see if I double click on this, what'll come out. All right, I think it came out. Here it says the Italian Cookbook version 5, different from the one I had before. This is our table of contents. And if I go to my library, you can see my book right here. So that is the that's the presentation. From here, I'm hoping that people will be excited, that they at least see what the process is to make an ebook. It's very, for the most part, straightforward, but you do have to get comfortable using a different tool. One of the things that I didn't mention in this run, I don't remember mentioning it, is having been involved in publishing projects. I've noticed that publishing projects are generally split up over two parts. You are either working on the editorial side, creating words and the content, or you're working on the production side where you're you're generating the artifact, you're generating the book. There's definitely two parts. There's the editorial side, and then there's the production side. And when you're making an EPUB, I would say it's generally on the production side, but it's a great hat to wear, and the fact that there are all these tools out there so that you can do it yourself is fantastic. We went about a little longer than my what I want. It's about 49 minutes. Put a timestamp here at the chat. Thanks very much, everybody.